Good evening and welcome back this week to Balancing the Scales of Justice. I'm Shirley Millwood. I'm an attorney at Millwood Law Firm in Alexandria. I practice law across the county and as well as across the state of Alabama. I've been a licensed attorney. In just a few weeks it'll be 15 years, and I've been in the legal field for 26 years. Appreciate you all tuning in this week, and just hope that we can give you all a tidbit of information that might be able to help you, give some guidance to you if you're facing a legal challenge, or if you know someone who is facing a legal challenge. Of course, we don't get very deep into these cases because the facts of each case are different. And so if we can just, our goal is to give you a general surface, as I call it, a general surface legal advice to just kind of get you started, maybe moving in the right direction. Again, it's not case specific, as each case of the facts of each case are different. Anyhow, thank you all for tuning in and being with us this week. And this week I have with me Stacy Upton, and Stacy and I have been, oh my gosh, we've been friends forever. Forever. We actually went to law school together and rode together a lot of times whenever I was able to do so, because I was
together
juggling the children. And then after, well, I think while we were in law school, I was working for Tom Young. Mm-hmm. I left Tom's office and you took over as Tom's paralegal when I left. And that, were you in law school then?
I was in law school, stayed there until graduation. So I was there until I graduated into the bar.
Okay. And so Stacy and I took the bar together. We graduated law school together in December 2008. Yeah. Set for the bar at the same time in February 2009. Became licensed the same time. And then how long did you and I practice together?
8 years? I think 8 years.
Somewhere between 8 and 9 years.
8 and 9 years.
So we have gone through a whole lot of life together, and so I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you.
And where, you're currently practicing where?
I am in downtown Anniston. I like to call it the trifecta of restaurants. I'm right across the street from Afina's Rock and Roll and Bistos. And
I'm a little bit jealous of that. You can just walk out your door and walk to.
I can. It's the waist is growing. So.
And so anyway, Stacy is a licensed attorney and has been for a very long time as well, and has a ton of experience in, gosh, probably a multitude of areas of the law.
Two big areas, and then a little bit in other areas too.
So what are your major areas of law that you practice in?
The two major areas that I practice in are bankruptcy and criminal defense.
And speaking of bankruptcy, I was so excited when Stacy joined the firm years ago, because I was a bankruptcy lawyer back then. And I loved it, though. I don't know if you love it as much as I do, because I'll tell you one thing about bankruptcy: you rarely ever have an unhappy client. Would you agree with that?
I agree, yeah.
That was one of my favorite parts of that, is, you know, less clients are complaining because they're so happy to have that financial burden lifted off of them, you know, especially when they're going through trying times. And so when Stacy came, I was like, hey, here, take over my bankruptcy practice. And so that was great. And then I think after that you started doing criminal defense work, or maybe before that.
I was doing it before, but really got a lot more cases at that point. I started practicing more heavier in that area.
So when you first got out of law school, weren't you practicing with Harry Long?
I was with Harry Long, and I have moved back into his building and practicing there again now.
That loyalty, huh?
Yes.
I know.
Very loyal.
I remember that.
Excellent attorney, wonderful man.
And Harry is only a bankruptcy lawyer, isn't he?
Bankruptcy and civil with businesses and corporations.
Okay. Well, I guess I just say that because, you know, I'm used to being in the courtroom all the time, and that's usually where I would see him, is in bankruptcy court. Yeah. Because most of his is in a different courtroom.
For the first 6 years of practice, no one in Calhoun County really knew who I was, because I was in the bankruptcy court and not in the state court. So
there you go. And so then you've handled a lot of bankruptcy and a lot of criminal defense. And then what other areas have you
I have done juvenile, both dependency work and delinquency, representing children who've also gotten into trouble. I have done probate work. I have done adoptions,
LLCs,
setting up businesses,
corporations.
Some Social Security disability.
I do remember that. I'd forgotten about that. Yes.
And I got to do a federal to appeal to the federal district court this year, so that was interesting to see that process. So.
Yeah, I would like to know about that. That's kind of cool, because I used to handle a lot of Social Security disability work at one time, and my family law practice just took over everything.
Yeah.
And it trumped everything. I just didn't have time for anything more.
And appellate work is starting to pick up. I'm getting a lot of appellate appointments for various different criminal, family, on both sides, getting family and criminal appellate work. So
I've handled a lot of appellate work in divorce and custody and dependency and termination of parental right cases, but and there's been a few others. I can't remember exactly, but one area that I never practiced in appellate work is criminal practice.
And I think you'll agree with me, appellate work, when you do the appellate work, you learn more. You learn, I mean, it's different to be in the courtroom every day and to practice it, but to actually go back and remember the laws that we read when we were in law school to come into play and see, oh, we should have done this, or they should have done that, and this was a little bit off. So it's interesting to go back and touch up on those areas again.
You know, and there's nothing like having that hands-on experience in the courtroom and having to spend those hours and hours and hours of preparing your case for trial and going through discovery and depositions and interrogatories and requests for production and all of those things to prepare your case for trial. You know, examining witnesses, or, you know, prepping witnesses, or speaking with witnesses, and all of those things. But like you said, when you get to the point that you're not in the courtroom and you're working on it from an appellate side, you know, and I guess for my thing is, like, we're going in trying cases, we're trying cases all the time, always in the courtroom. But when you sit down and you start working on appellate work, you have to delve off into the case law. Mm-hmm. And you have to delve off into the opinions. And while we read opinions regularly, to me, like, I get a different feel when I'm handling appellate work, just because I'm having to read way more.
Exactly. A lot of reading.
And I don't know about you, but when I get to research and I get lost, do you get lost?
Yes.
End up going down all these rabbit trails.
It is chasing squirrels down foxholes.
And it's not always necessarily because, or for me, like, I'm researching cases that are relevant to what I'm arguing on appeal, but then I run across those cases that are just interesting. Mm-hmm. And it may have nothing to do with my issues on appeal, but it's just the facts of the case are interesting. And so I get lost reading that. And
because it's a story. It's a story. You're reading a story of how it progressed through the whole legal system, how from the very beginning up until to the end, to what the judges decided.
You know, that makes a good point, because I'm always saying, gosh, I never get to read for pleasure, because I'm always, you know, reading hundreds or thousands of pages of medical records or DHR records, bank records, credit card records, you name it. Like, sometimes it's just so mundane and boring, but it's always interesting. But that gives me a different spin on that next time I think that to myself, because I guess that's why I choose, because, you know, what you and I are reading is real life.
Yes.
It's not a fiction or, you know, a fantasy world. These are real life cases and things that are affecting someone somewhere.
Yes.
Or several people.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So tell us, we're going to talk today a little bit about bankruptcy, if that's good with you.
Sure.
So tell us, what are generally, first of all, let me back up. You were on Noble Street, but tell us how our viewers can get in touch with you.
Oh, you can call me. My number is 256-770-8089, or you can email me at stacy@uptonlawllc.com, or you can visit my website, uptonlawllc.com.
And you've got like this fancy, cute pictures, and she's got her website all cute, and I'm like a little jealous, but anyway, it's nice and cute. So UptonLawLLC.com. So anyway, we're going to talk about bankruptcy, but if y'all need to get in touch with Stacy, if you have a bankruptcy case, she is your person to call and get in to see her and let her help you with your situation. And I know that we have, just because it just occurred to me, we have our disclaimer on here that we're required pursuant to the Alabama State Bar, but a bankruptcy lawyer, my understanding, has to have a different disclaimer.
We do. I mean, in addition to what the State Bar puts out, we cannot, I'm
trying to remember how it's worded.
I mean, we can't, we can't record phone calls, depending on which side you work on. We have to give out things according to the Fair Credit Reporting Act as well. So when we, depending if you're a creditor or if you are a debtor.
And so the first thing that comes to mind, and I'm sure the majority of our viewers and everyone else has seen it at some point in their life, is no, I'm sorry, I'm about to spit off our words. It's this is an attempt to collect a debt. Any information obtained may be used against you for that purpose.
Yes.
Yes, I did some collection work way back in the day. I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so if someone is having financial difficulty, that is generally when they're going to call you to consult with about a bankruptcy, if they just kind of feel like they're overwhelmed and they just feel like there's no way out. Can you kind of explain that to us a little bit?
They do, and that is the hardest thing that the person does, is have to admit that, hey, I'm in a financial situation, I may be in over my head, and to pick up the phone and call is sometimes the hardest thing that that individual has to do, because no one wants to admit that we have, and all of us have gone through financial struggles. I'm sure you have, I have, everyone has, and nobody wants to have to come to that point to say, I need some help. But thankfully, it's not something to not be ashamed of. Our founding fathers, if they didn't want us to do, they set this up. They set up the bankruptcy system for us years and years ago so that we could
have some debt relief.
Yeah, have debt relief, because if you look at it, that's part of the reason why they came to America. Part of why they started the colonies here is because they were being taxed and overly taxed. So, our founding fathers did not want the people of America to have to go to jail for their debts. So,
makes sense. You just taught me something I didn't know. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back in, I think, a minute or so. So y'all hang with us, and we're going to come back and talk more about the bankruptcy and how the attorneys can help navigate you through the court systems in a bankruptcy case. We were talking with Stacy about bankruptcies before we went to break. Stacy, what are some of the reasons why, or what are some of the most, I guess the majority of the reasons why you see someone coming in to file a bankruptcy action?
The biggest reasons that I see when people come into my office is medical bills. They have a lot of medical bills, coupled with life. Something traumatic has happened. They've lost a job, a divorce between a husband and a wife, where they've went from a double income to a single income. Everybody thinks, oh, they've ran up thousands of dollars in credit cards, and that's, sometimes you do see that, but typically that's not the case. It is hardworking people who have just been dealt a blow in life that they're financially just cannot just bounce back from.
And as we know, life has a way of
humbling us very quickly.
It does, and life can take a big turn and give you a lot of blows in life.
Yeah, at a moment's notice.
Yes. And so if someone is overwhelmed with their finances and they're working and they're just doing everything they can to try to, as I call, dig their way out of this mess, mm-hmm. and they just get to the point where they just feel like they've lost all hope and they don't see any way out of it, is that someone you would say, yes, pick up the phone and call and come in and schedule an appointment and come in and talk with me?
Absolutely. I'm sorry. I don't charge for consultations for bankruptcies.
There you go. Yeah.
So
free consultations.
It's always, I am always available to talk to someone. Sometimes it's a relief that we can help and I can get them back onto what they need to be doing to where they can bounce back. Sometimes bankruptcy is not the option for people, but just getting a good plan on how to move forward and how to budget their money, or to let's pay this first and then see where we are in a few months and come back to discuss it, because sometimes bankruptcy is right, but you don't want to file too early and you don't want to file too late for bankruptcy. You want to get them just right.
I was going to say, and it can be a fine line in there sometimes, because there are a lot of rules.
Absolutely, because once you pull that trigger, you can't go back, and you only have so many years between that you can file bankruptcy, so that you can't just keep, oh, let me do it this year, and then in a couple of years, if it hadn't got any better, I can't do it. You can't do it again. So there's statutes that we have to follow that is in place that you can only file so many times.
And I want to say, I started working for Hank Watson back in 1997, and he handled primarily bankruptcy cases. He had some other things he handled, but primarily bankruptcy. I want to say back then there was no limitation on how frequently a person could file.
There wasn't then, but in 2005 they changed the bankruptcy laws.
Okay.
And
gosh, it's almost been 19 years ago,
19
or has
years
been. Wow, I didn't realize it'd been that long.
And so now, depending on which type of bankruptcy, which there's several types of bankruptcy, but depending on which type, you have time frames from which you can file from the first bankruptcy to the second bankruptcy.
So if someone comes in to see you, if you don't feel that the timing is right for them to file a bankruptcy, you're going to advise them of that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And and I was just sitting here thinking, also people have ended up in situations where they've been sued and they have a judgment against them.
Yes.
Those are also a lot of, I know I used to see that a lot in bankruptcies.
I do see that a lot too.
Okay.
So.
And one other thing, years ago, and I haven't handled a bankruptcy case in so long, I don't know, I can remember a few times, there'd be someone who was an offender bender in a car wreck. They ended up with a whole lot of damages they needed to pay. They lost their driver's license. Mm-hmm. We could file a bankruptcy to repay some or all of that debt, and they were able to get their license reinstated. Is that still something they can do?
That is still something they can do, and it's something that still happens. Is they get an offender bender, they don't have insurance to cover it, or they don't have enough insurance to cover it. They've been sued. They could probably may not have what we call perfected service on them, or they got the paperwork from the sheriff's office or in the mail and they just sort of disregarded it, and they ended up getting a judgment against them. And when that happens, if it's a situation with a car wreck, your license could be suspended, and you wouldn't really know about it until you were coming home one night and you make a mistake in front of an officer, and then you find out that your license is suspended.
That's a heck of a way to find out,
It is
isn't
a terrible way to find out.
Wow. And so if someone needs to come in and see you, what do they need to bring with you? With them when they come to meet with you? Like, what do you need to see, and what do you need to provide to the court?
It's not necessarily that you have to have it on the first time that you come see me, but before you file your bankruptcy, of course, I need to see your driver's license. I need to see your social security number, because we have to verify that your social security number is correct, because it, just like your credit, it goes on your credit report. So we got to make sure we have it to the correct person. The trustee's office wants to see your bank statements for the last 6 months. They also want to see your last 2 income tax returns. So, and you also have to provide your payroll stub if you're working. So for your payroll stub, so that we can get the bankruptcy court can get accurate information about how much you're making.
So what if someone's self-employed and they don't have a pay stub? What do they bring to you?
Hopefully they're using something like QuickBooks or an accounting software, or just a good checking ledger that keeps up with what they're spending their money on and where their money goes.
So whatever their financial books
Absolutely.
are, how they generally keep up with
Yes.
the operations of their
Yes.
business. Okay.
Because you just got to show whether your income and whether you're earning your income and if that's correct amount.
And so there are different chapters of bankruptcy. I've handled the Chapter 7s and the Chapter 13s. I know Harry is primarily known for the Chapter 11 bankruptcy lawyer.
He's known for that. When I've worked with his office, we've done Chapter 11, which is primarily bankruptcy for businesses, but can be a lot individuals that have a lot of assets that can do a Chapter 13. Those are rare cases. You don't see that a lot. But
the Chapter 11 is kind of more of a restructuring, isn't it?
It's a restructuring of a business, and I guess if you're going to do it for an individual, the layman's terms would be a super big Chapter 13. But
okay.
It's a lot more complicated, and a lot more expensive, and a lot more details that's involved in the Chapter 11s than
and then so
one.
What's the difference in the 7 and the 13?
The 7 is what we call a liquidation bankruptcy. It eliminates your debts, but it allows you to keep certain debts that you want and that you need, your house, your car, but it allows you to get rid of, the excessive medical bills or the credit cards or the timeshare that you no longer want. Those things that are weighting you down, those little bitty minimum payments each month, they keep weighting you down so that you can't make the bigger payments.
So on a Chapter 7, if we have unsecured debt, we would discharge that unsecured debt.
Yes.
And if we have secured debt, that's what you're talking about, house,
yes,
cars,
your house,
tractors,
your car.
motorcycles, things of that sort. So they would sign a reaffirmation agreement to
Yes,
reaffirm
that's
that
what-
debt on that house.
It's
Okay.
it's like re-signing the contract that you bought at the very beginning, and it treats it as if bankruptcy never happened. So if you get behind again, they could come back into the court system again and try to collect on you again.
So I guess kind of in layman terms, if you're reaffirming a debt on, say, your house or a car, it's, I guess in layman terms, you're excluding that debt from the bankruptcy because that debt nor the lien will be discharged in the bankruptcy.
Correct. And a lot of times, clients, when they come in, they want to tell me, I don't want to file on my home. I don't want to file bankruptcy on my home. Well, we have to list it because it's a federal law and a federal rule that we have to list all of our debts, but then there's check marks and special paperwork in that bankruptcy for the secured debts that you want to keep, and that's when the reaffirmation agreements come into play.
Let me ask you a hypothetical, because I know I used to see this a lot.
Okay.
Husband and wife comes in, they have 3 vehicles. Will the court generally allow them to reaffirm all 3 vehicles?
It depends. It's
Okay.
always a, it
That's always a
depends.
lawyer's answer.
I know it's a typical lawyer answer, but it really does depend. Do they have a 16, 17-year-old child that is needing it to get to and from places to
Okay.
where they can? Now, if it is a...
So the court generally, if they do have a teenage child at home that's driving, that's getting to work, getting to school, the court generally will allow them to reaffirm that debt if they have the room in their budget to pay for it.
If they have the room to pay for it, and it has been my experience that our judge has been letting those.
Okay. Well, that's
letting
good to
them do
know,
that.
because that might be a reason why some people say they don't want to file bankruptcy. They don't want to risk losing their child's vehicle.
Right. Now, if it is a 1955 Chevy Bel Air that is really decked out that you see at the cruise ins, probably not going to be able to get to keep that if you have a payment on that, or if you've just purchased that and put a note on it, you wouldn't be able to keep something like that.
Excuse me. And there are some other caveats, like you can incur a debt within X number of days of filing a bankruptcy.
Right. And generally, I like to tell my clients, by the time they come see me, no more charging, no more, you can use your debit card because that's connected to your bank account, but no using of your credit cards. Do not go out and take out a new loan because it can get you in trouble. It can get into an adversary proceeding in bankruptcy court, which is layman's terms is a lawsuit. in bankruptcy court.
So basically what that is, or at least it appears to the court, whether the person did it intentionally or not, if they went out and took out a loan or a credit card, charged up a credit card, then it's almost like they committed fraud.
Correct.
And even though they had no intention of doing that.
Correct, because the court is looking at it, you know you're about to file bankruptcy, and so you're taking out all this debt to make this person lose this, or this company lose money, and that's, the court deems that unfair, so you may have to pay that back.
And unfortunately, our time on this show is about to end, so what we're going to do is finish this up, and we're going to have another segment on Chapter 13s, if that's good with you, because
Sure.
I know that's the other chapter.
Sure.
And then we can air that next week and talk about that next week. But I think it's important for people to know this. But at Chapter 7, how long does it stay on your credit report?
It depends on the credit agency. I tell my clients it can stay there anywhere between 7 to 10 years.
And I think generally 10 years is sort of the rule, that you can expect it to be there for 10. If it comes off before, then you're lucky.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And how long does it last, like from the time you file the petition until you get a discharge?
Typically I would say about 6 months if it's a very smooth and easy bankruptcy. Your creditors have a certain amount of time to object, and once that objection time is passed, and if no creditors have objected to your bankruptcy, typically it goes out pretty quick and it's discharged.
So
or dismissed, not discharged, which means dismissed.
So much less painless process.
Yes.
All right, y'all, thank you for joining in this week. Join us next week. We're going to talk about Chapter 13 bankruptcies.